Hello and welcome to this special podcast. Today our talk trying to find out the relationship between social media and political acts in Yemeni case. During 6 years war in Yemen, social media platforms have shown various voices which discuss Yemeni case. Each voice advocates one of the parties of conflict, including Houthis, Arab coalition, Yemeni government and southern case. Though social media activists have been reporting news, posting newspaper articles, tweeting and sharing their opinion, creating hashtags and uploading videos that support their point of views, all these voices could go nowhere but only prolonging the war and suffering, which brought many questions such as: have social media platforms contributed or affected making political decisions since the Yemeni revolution began? Or social media platforms are subject to political decision makers in a way? To have such answers, we put these questions as referendum in social media platforms. There were 44% voted. Surprisingly, 59% believe that social media platforms are subject to political decision makers, while 36% think that social media makes difference in Yemeni case, and 5% got another opinion. To know more about this complicated relationship, we have asked Dr. Ali Al-Sagaf, Professor of Econometrics and Statistics in University of Aden, also Civic Education and Leadership Fellow of Maxwell's School for Citizenship and Public Affairs. Let's listen to what Dr. Ali said.
Population estimates for Yemen was 31 million in 2020, and according to the International Telecommunication Union, 7 million Yemenis use the internet, which equals to 22% of the total population. In other words, 78% of the total population does not know anything about this network, and they are the majority of the population in rural areas. Of course, among the 7 million Yemenis who use the internet, 1.4 million of them are from the South Yemen and 5.6 in the North Yemen. And the supporters of the Houthis who overthrew the government in the capital Sana'a in 2014 are the majority, and the supporters of the legitimacy and the coalition fighting to restore the government to Sana'a are the minority. In other parts of the country, literacy rate in Yemen is 50%, and 85% of the population considered as cultural illiterate, and in such a situation it is difficult to talk about the role of social media in political decision making. The social media helped spread the Yemeni crisis all over the world in general, and the southern issue in particular. Southerners have a loud voice and are calling for independence, dignity, freedom, and a return to the situation of two states which was before 1990. I cannot say that social media helped in making the Yemeni political decision, because in the Yemeni case there is no decision making process, there is decision taking, and the political decision is taken by narrow minority in the president's office by those around him, especially the leaders of Islamic Islah party. The Yemeni population has been living in a crisis since 6 years ago, and it is a situation of war, poverty, starvation, lack of services and salaries, high prices, inflation, and people in this case, they don't care what is published on social media, because the hungry people don't think, as Karl Marx said.
Thank you, Dr. Ali, for sharing your remarkable knowledge. This is really enriching us. Also, I believe we have political point of view from Mr. Saleh Al-Noud, who is one of Southern Transitional Council, STC members, and media activist as well. Let's listen to Mr. Saleh.
When considering the role of social media in shaping of public opinion in the ongoing political situation in Yemen in particular. I think that there is a positive and, of course, a negative to the role. In terms of the positives, I think that social media has allowed for an open discussion without restrictions. People have been able to express their views openly, which is healthy and develops a good basis for democracy in the future. And this is, of course, something that has been prevented in the normal mainstream media, controlled by those who are in power. But I think there is a negative side to the role of social media, in that there's been very little scrutiny, very little monitoring of the contents, and it's allowed for people who have very little understanding, or let's say minimal understanding of the situation, to express views which have been counterproductive and misleading at times. And we've seen so many examples of people on Facebook live streams and other platforms where they express the situation in a way which has, in my opinion, sometimes caused divisions and certainly confused the ordinary follower of the developing situation in Yemen. I think there could be room for utilizing social media in a better way in the future, whereby those who have the ability and an understanding of the situation can openly talk about the issues in a logical and constructive way, away from trying to use these platforms to advance individual opinions which may not be useful to the general good of the situation. But certainly if I was to choose between allowing social media to continue, then social media to continue to talk about the issues in Yemen, then I certainly will be for that, because the freedoms that are being exercised have not existed in the past, and I think social media platforms has allowed for that level of openness and transparency, which I think should be celebrated. Of course, with the caveat that it should be as constructive as possible and should not allow for divisions and to make the situation worse, at least in terms of the people's understanding of what is going on in Yemen.
Thank you really, Mr. Saleh, for sharing your opinion. This was really interesting. I believe we have come to the end of this podcast. We hope we have enriched your knowledge. Finally, I would like to thank everyone who helped me to achieve this podcast. Many thanks to our guests, Dr. Ali Sagaf and Mr. Saleh Al-Noor. Also, Mr. Nasr Al-Aswad for helping me with digital techniques. Thanks also to Mr. Tawfiq Bawazir, media activist, who shared this referendum on his Twitter account. Really thanks to everyone voted and commented. Unforgettable, of course, to thank you, our listeners, for your precious time. Hopefully meeting you in another podcast presented by me, Hiba Al-Abadi. Goodbye.